Okay, so let's talk about your homeostasis. So this is a big concept that we need to understand. So basically, your homeostasis is your physiologic balance. Just like our body, we need to maintain the equilibrium or state of balance. Like your blood, we need to remain or stays with the range, like your pH level. Your blood should be remain on the pH level, like your and glucose, your internal body temperature. If we're talking about your homeostasis, it's all about maintaining your balance. But we operate around various set points that fluctuate when exposed to a various stimuli. So that's your dynamic equilibrium. There is a, if we talk about your homeostasis, there is a physiologic mechanism that protect us from this. How do we know? What organ system that maintains that? Obviously, you probably know that's the nervous system. Because if we fail to return back to normal set points, diseases ensue or sickness starts, right? Okay, so what is a homeostasis? Homeostasis is simply the maintenance, okay, of a constant internal environment despite fluctuations in the internal or external environment. So simply, your homeostasis is about the maintenance of a stable internal environment. Okay? It's the maintenance of a stable internal environment. Okay? Maintenance of a constant or a stable internal environment. Okay? It is simply the maintenance of a stable environment. Like for example, our body temperature, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your blood glucose level, your blood cells, okay, your respiratory rate. Oh, by the way, we have this term that we need to understand, variables. Okay, variables means the measures of a body properties that may change in value. How the body responds to a particular stimuli. We will go further, okay, if we give some examples. To that. Like for example, in a case of when it is cold outside, lalo na ngayon, bare month, di ba? Sobrang lamig. Tapos wala ka pang kayakap, wala ka pang jowa, di lalo kang lalamigan. Char. Okay? Lalo na kapag malamig, okay, nagdi-decrease ang ating temperature. So, ang nangyayari dyan is your sweat gland ceases to produce. Natural. You may start, okay, as your body compensate to a cold temperature, you may start to shiver. So, the muscle starts to contract, and this contraction of your muscle, they can generate heat. Your blood vessels decrease in diameter size, blood vessels constrict. So, nako-conserve ngayon yung ating heat. Mangyayari, mag-i-increase ng temperature. So, ganun yon yung ating homeostasis. Okay? On the other hand, on the flip side, kapag mainit naman, kasi di ba mainit din naman dito sa Pilipinas, kapag mainit sa labas, you have to thank your nerve, okay? It acts as a sensor, okay? You have to thank your nerve because that heat is being detected. Okay, your brain notices this and sends signals to counteract the variables. So, ano mangyayari? Pag mainit, nadidetect ng brain mo, ano mangyayari sa katawan mo? Diba? Ano mangyayari? Sweat glands produces your sweat. So, ikaw po ay magsusweat. Magpapawisan ka. So, heat is lost and sweat evaporates off your skin. Minsan, kapag mainit, you may have redness too. Ang nangyayari sa blood vessels mo dyan, nagda-dilate, okay, blood vessels wider to get rid of that particular heat, and then, tsaka, bumababa yung temperature mo. That's how a homeostasis is. That is a homeostasis is, okay? It's maintaining about your stable internal environment despite the fluctuations, okay, of the external or internal environment. Okay, we have this particular term that we need to ponder. We have the term normal range. Okay, normal range is simply normal extent of an increase or a decrease around a set point. What is a set point? A set point is the normal, or that's the average value of a variable over time. So your example is your body temperature. It fluctuates around a set point. Okay, take a look at this figure. Okay. So, the normal range or the average value of your temperature, okay, average value is set as at 98.6. So, that is the set point. That is the normal or the average value of a variable. Now, what is a normal range? That is still normal to the extent of increase or decrease. So, this degree Fahrenheit of 98.8 and 98.4, between that, okay, your increase and your decrease around a set point, that is a normal range. Normal extent, normal pa rin siya to the extent of increase or decrease around a set point. It is within the range. Okay? So, yun yung normal range na tinatawag po natin. Again, your temperature, okay, is set at 98.6 degree Fahrenheit. So, that's the normal or the average value, okay, of a variable. Okay, set points for some variables can be temporarily adjusted depending on the body activities as needed. Like for example, your body temperature, common cause is your fever, heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate when a particular person exercise. Okay. Okay. In discussing your homeostasis, guys, it is very important to understand the concept of this main form of regulation. The main form of regulation is through feedback loops. Okay? The main form, okay, of regulation is through your feedback loops. There are two loops. Okay? We have your negative and your positive feedback loop. Okay. Let's start with your negative feedback. Okay. Uulitin ko lang ha. Your main form of regulation is through feedback loops. Because we are always exposed to internal and external stimuli, so your nervous system requires constant monitoring. So the main form of regulation is through your feedback loops. Okay, there are two loops. Okay, we have two loops. Okay, the first one is the most common. This is the most common regulatory mechanism in human body. Okay, so that is your negative feedback. Okay, we need to understand this, guys. Okay, negative feedback. Your negative feedback is the main mechanism used in homeostatic regulation. Okay, in homeostatic regulation. A negative feedback response involves detection of deviation away from set point and correction, reversal of deviation toward set point and normal range. Ano daw? Oh, hirap intindihin ba yung ating negative feedback loop na yan? Ganito ang nangyayari dyan, guys. Okay, illustrate natin. Kailangan lang natin itong i-discuss. White screen. Ayan. Okay. Ano yung dinidiscuss natin, guys? Your negative feedback loop. Okay, your negative feedback loop. Negative feedback loop. Okay. Wait. Parang mas gusto kong gamitan ng Windows Journal ite. Ayan, parang mas gusto ko to. Okay, your two kinds of your loop. We have your negative. Diba? Mas maganda siya. Negative feedback loop. Okay, your negative feedback loop. Okay. Remember that your negative feedback loop is the most common regulatory mechanism in human body. Okay, that's the most common. Okay, that's the most common, okay, most common regulatory mechanism. That's the most common regulatory mechanism in the human body. Mechanism in the human body. Mechanism in the human body. In the human body. So, ayan. That's your negative feedback loop na tinatawag po natin. Okay, what about your negative feedback loop, sir? If that is the most common regulatory mechanism in the human body. Remember, guys, there are three components. Okay, there are three components. There are three components. Okay, we have your receptor. Okay, we have your receptor. Okay, letter B. We have your control center. Okay, we have your control center. Okay. We have your receptor. Nandyan ang ating control center. And your, what do you think is the third one? Okay, that's your effector organ. Okay, your RCE. Effector organ. Okay, so the three components that we need to take into consideration. Okay, so we have your receptor, control center, and your effector organ. Okay, going back sa PowerPoint natin, guys. Okay, ayan. So, there are three components, okay, of a feedback. What are those? We have your receptor. Anong ginagawa ng receptor? It detects changes in variable. Actually, this receptor, they're specialized cells within the nervous system. Their main job is to detect changes, of course, that disrupts our well-being. Actually, nag-aantay po sila ng tinatawag nating stimulus na tinatawag natin. Okay, ano naman, sir, ang ating tinatawag na control center? Your control center, of course, you probably know that your control center is your central nervous system. That's the main control. Okay? It receives receptor signal. What else? Establishes your set point. Ano yung set point natin? That's the normal or average value. It sends signal to the effector organ. Ano naman yung effector natin? Directly causes change in variable. Okay? Ang effector mo, okay, that is a component that directly causes the change in variable. Receptor, siya yung nagdi-detect ng change. Nag-aantay lang siya ng stimuli. Okay? The component that receives the receptor signal is the control center, which is your central nervous system. And the one directly causing change is the effector. O, paano ba nangyayari yan, guys? Okay, paano nangyayari yan? Okay, you have to think of a loop. Okay? Saan na yun? Okay, ayan. Going back to our journal para makita natin. So, receptor. Anong ginagawa ng receptor natin? Okay. Those are specialized cells. Okay, they are actually waiting for a stimulus. Okay, detecting your signal. Ito, directly causing change. O, ganito. So, those are the three components of your loop. So, you have to think of a loop na tinatawag natin. Loop, okay? You have to think of a loop that's a circular. Okay, paano, sir, yung ating mechanism? Paano yung ating mechanism? So, we have here a receptor. Okay. Sensya na, ha? Simpleng ano lang, di marunong mag-drawing talaga. Okay, we have here a receptor. And this receptor, so it begins with the receptor. Those are specialized cells within the system. So their main job is to detect your changes that disrupt our well-being. So they are actually waiting for a particular stimulus. This receptor, okay, when they detect that, when they detect the change, what they do is they generate. Anong ginagawa nila, class? They generate impulses to what we call, okay, they generate impulses to what we call, anong tawag natin dyan sa susunod na component natin? Yes, very good. That is your control center. Okay, that is your control center na tinatawag natin. That is your control center. So, you probably know that the control center is your central nervous system. Okay. This receptor, again, okay, this receptor, okay, they pick up that changes, they will send information. Okay, kanino sila magsisend ng information, guys? To the control center. This control center now will develop a plan of attack. How in the world we put this back into normal situation. So the control center will figure out, okay, paano nila ibabalik into a normal situation. And then they will communicate now. Anong gagawin nila? They will now communicate. Okay, they will now communicate. Okay, they will now communicate to the effector organ. Okay, they will now communicate to your effector organ. They will now communicate to your effector organ. Okay? So, when the receptor, so it begins with the receptor. So, those are specialized cells. They're actually waiting for stimulus. So, when they detect that there's a stimulus, there's a stimuli that disrupt their well-being, receptor now detects the change. What they do is they generate impulses. Okay? What we call your control center. Okay? When this receptor pick up that change, they will send information to the control center. They develop a plan of attack. How in the world we're going to put this into a normal situation. The control center will figure it out. They will communicate with the effector organ, and it carries out the right response, and they take back to a normal situation or to a normal set point. Okay, then receptor, ang mangyayari kasi ganito, guys. Okay, pag si receptor na-detect niya yung stimulus, okay, when this receptor pick up the change, they will send information to what we call your control center. Your control center will now develop a plan of attack. How in this world are we going to put this back into normal situation? Your control center will figure it out. They will communicate to the effector organ. Okay? Okay, it carries out now. This effector organ should carry out the right response and take back into normal set point. Ganun ang ating tinatawag na mechanism ng ating tinatawag na most common regulatory mechanism, which is your negative feedback. So, kapag bumalik na yan sa normal na situation, ano mangyayari dyan, guys? Okay? So, the receptor will shut off. The control center will shut off. The effector organ will shut off. Sir, bakit? Because if we overdo this response, pathologic response occur. Okay? Kung hindi nag-shut off yan, may problema. Okay? Disease will ensue. Sickness will ensue. Ganon ang negative mechanism na tinatawag natin. Okay, let's bring this a little more to life. Okay, bibigyan natin yan ng magandang example. Okay, let's bring this a little more to life. Magbibigay tayo ng tinatawag nating example. Okay, so meron tayong figure dito. Okay, doon pala sa PowerPoint. Okay, meron akong hinandang figure po dyan. It's your negative feedback kanina. Parang na-discuss ko rin kasi binigyan ko na ng example yan. Ayan, negative feedback control of your body temperature. Okay. Okay, lalakihan lang natin, guys. Ayan. Okay, that is an example. The most common example of a negative feedback is your thermostat. Your thermostat. That's the most common example na nai-encounter natin sa mga book. Okay, your thermostat. Okay, your thermostat. As I've said a while ago, guys, your thermostat is one of the best example of your negative feedback na tinatawag natin. Our body temperature is set, okay, its set point is 37 degrees Celsius. So, ang magre-range yan, okay, 98.4 hanggang 98. Now, your body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, for example. We need this temperature, we need to maintain that for us to function effectively. If we get cold, okay, your body temperature decreases. Okay, ito yung uunahin nating figure class. Okay, to follow with me. Gamitin nating laser point. Ito, first, mechanism. Okay. So, ito yung set point natin. It is set at 37 or 98.6. Tinatawag natin. So, that's the set point. Now, if your temperature, if your body temperature, when the temperature is cold, temperature decreases. Ayan. Okay? Your temperature decreases. So, ang nangyari guys, hindi natin na-maintain yung homeostasis kasi bumaba yung temperature natin. Na-disturb ba ang ating homeostasis? Yes, because body temperature decreases. So, hindi natin na-maintain. Maintaining the stable internal stimuli, that's the definition or the characteristic of a homeostasis. Pero kapag hindi mo na-maintain ang ating temperature po natin, nadi-disturb yung homeostasis kasi bumababa yung temperature. What happens next? Okay, ano ang mangyayari dyan ngayon? Ang mangyayari ay pag bumaba ang yung temperature, okay, pag bumaba ang temperature natin, if we get cold, your body temperature decreases. Okay? Sorry. Your body temperature decreases. Okay? Your body temperature decreases. This, okay, body temperature, pag na-detect ng katawan natin yan, di ba may stimulus, bumaba yung temperature mo. Okay? Na-detect ni receptor. Okay, ang gagawin ngayon ng receptor po natin, okay, will now signals the control center po natin. So, anong gagawin ng control center in the brain po natin? Okay, it decrease now the stimulation of your sweat glands. So, ang mangyayari dyan, kapag bumaba ang temperature mo, okay, your control center in the brain, it will decrease the stimulation of your sweat glands. So, ang mangyayari sa blood vessels mo dyan, nagko-constrict ang blood vessels in the skin when receptors detect decreased body temperature. Okay, so ang mangyayari, your effector organ, which is your sweat gland, sees sweat production, blood vessel in the skin constrict, your skeletal muscle also contracts. So, ano mangyayari ngayon dyan? Pag bumabang temperature mo, malamig, anong ginagawa natin? Nagsi-shiver tayo. Okay? So, if the body temperature decreases, we tend to shiver. That's the body's response to a cold temperature. We tend to shivers. Bakit tayo nagsi-shiver, class? Because your skeletal muscle begins to contract. Okay? Ngayon, kapag nag-shiver po tayo, it generates heat. Tama. Okay? It generates heat. Kapag nag-generate ng heat yan, anong mangyayari? Okay? Babalik tayo ngayon into your body temperature now increases. So, babalik siya ngayon into the normal temperature na na-disturb kanina. Ayan. Ganun ang mechanism ng negative feedback. Na-disturban siya, pero babalik pa rin siya into a normal situation. Nakukuha natin? Okay? Now, on the flip side naman, okay, on the flip side naman, buburahin lang natin, on the flip side naman, kapag naman tumaas, dito tayo, kapag naman tumaas ang iyong tinatawag na temperature, pag tumaas naman ang temperature mo guys, anong nangyari? It is not within the normal or average value. It's not within the set point. So, kapag tumaas ang temperature mo, it's not within the normal range po natin, pag tumaas yan, your body temperature increases, homeostasis is disturbed. Anong mangyayari ngayon dyan? Okay, so pag tumaas yan, madidetect yan ni receptor. Uy, sabi niya, tumaas ang temperature niya. Na-detect niya yung stimulus. There's a change. Yung receptor na yan, magsisignal yan ngayon sa control center. The control center in the brain now, okay, anong gagawin niya? Pag tumaas ang yung temperature, okay, siyempre na-detect yan ng ating tinatawag na receptor. There's a variable, there's a change. Okay, what happens now is the control center in the brain, it will increase now the stimulation of your sweat glands. Okay, it will increase now the stimulation of your sweat glands. And it will now relax your blood vessels in the skin when receptor detects increased body temperature. Kapag na-detect ni receptor that there is a sudden increase in temperature, okay, your control center now in the brain increase stimulation of your sweat glands and relax. Nag-i-increase in diameter ang blood vessel mo in the skin. Okay, minsan ang nangyayari pa kapag ikaw po ay tawag dito, mataas ang temperature mo, you may have redness too, di ba? Because your blood vessel dilates, nagwa-widen. Okay? So, ganun ang nangyayari naman dyan ngayon. Next, what happens now? Okay? So, ang mangyayari dyan, magpuproduce ngayon ng sweat glands. Your effector organ, okay, will produce your sweat glands. Produce your sweat glands. Blood vessels in the skin dilate. O ang nangyayari, kapag nag-dilate ang blood vessels mo, okay, in order to get rid of the heat, bumababa ang temperature po natin. Bumababa ang temperature po natin. Okay? Bumababa ang ating temperature. When your temperature increases, again, ulitin ko lang, when your temperature increases, your receptor detects increase in body temperature. Your control center in the brain now increases the stimulation of your sweat glands. Okay? And it relaxes the blood vessels in the skin. Okay? So, nagda-dilate ang ating tinatawag na blood vessel mo sa skin. Okay? Magpuproduce ngayon ng tinatawag nating sweat glands. Okay? Sweat glands produces sweat glands produces your sweat. Blood vessels in the skin dilate. So as the skin dilate, okay, as you begin to sweat, water outside your body, okay, so may cooling effect yan, temperature goes down. Bumalik ka ba sa dati? Na-restore mo ba yung homeostasis? Nag-decrease ba ulit sa normal ang yung temperature? Yes. Yun yung normal na tinatawag natin. That's the negative feedback mechanism. Okay? If we say negative feedback mechanism sa field ng nursing or sa anatomy, specifically in anatomy, okay, actually that's a positive side. That's a positive side pag negative feedback na tinatawag natin. Okay? Maganda ang kinalabasan niyan kasi you restore into the homeostasis. You maintain into the homeostasis na tinatawag po natin. Okay. So, that is a negative feedback. Ma-disturb man, babalik at babalik pa rin siya into a normal situation. Okay? Or nare-restore yung ating tinatawag na homeostasis na tinatawag po natin. Okay. Sir, hindi ko naintindihan. O, paano hindi ko naintindihan? O, tignan natin. Bibigyan pa natin ng isa pang example. Okay? So, bigyan pa natin ng tinatawag nating isa pang example, sir, ng negative feedback na tinatawag natin. Okay, ganun lang naman concept ng negative feedback. Madidisturb, okay, there's a sudden change or may stimulus, madidetect ng receptor, okay, as the receptor receive that particular stimulus, it will generate impulses to the control center, which is your central nervous system, and communicates these impulses to the effector organ. And this effector organ, of course, will produce the right response. So if that is a right response, that's a negative feedback. So ang nangyari kapag na-restore yan, the receptor will shut off, the control center will shut off, the effector organ also will shut off. Because if we overdo that particular process or mechanism, diseases will occur or sickness will ensue. Yun yung tinatawag nating negative feedback na tinatawag po natin. Okay? So kapag in-illustrate mo kasi ang negative feedback, guys, ganito yung ating magiging illustration dyan. Balik tayo dyan. Okay? Pag in-illustrate mo kasi yan, ganito ang illustration niya. Ayan. Ganito magiging illustration yan, guys. So, this is your variable. Okay, this is your variable. Ito naman yung ating tinatawag na counter response. That's a negative feedback. Okay, that's your counter response. Okay, that is a counter response. That is a good illustration, okay, for your homeostasis. Okay, homeostasis for a negative feedback loop. Negative feedback loop. Kapag may sudden change or merong stimulus, okay, kung may stimulus na tinatawag natin, ang mangyayari dyan, kapag may stimulus, ganito. Isipin nyo na lang para mas madali. Ayan. Pantay ba? Hindi. Obviously, hindi. Tabingi. Okay. If there's a stimulus, there's a change, na-detect ng receptor natin. Pag negative feedback yan, laging may counter response. Kapag naibalik niya in the normal na ganitong state yan, na ganitong illustration, that's a negative feedback loop, which is good. Okay? Sa katawan ng tao. Okay? So, bear in mind, na pag sinabi natin negative feedback, hindi dahil negative ang ibig sabihin niya, negative din ang kanyang tinatawag na meaning. No. Kabaliktaran. Kasi counter. So, pag negative, may change. Okay, there's a variable. There's a change. Counter response. Yun yung tinatawag natin na negative feedback. Para bang, for example, sa relasyon nyo. For example, ayan. May stimulus. Na-detect nung isa. Ay, something is wrong. Parang may nangyayari ng hindi maganda sa relasyon natin. Ayan, no? Ayan. So, parang tabingin na. Parang nasa bingitan ng kamatayan ng relasyon natin. Anong gagawin mo ngayon dyan? You need to counter response. So, anong gagawin nyo? Pag-usapan nyo. Kailangan pag-usapan nating dalawa para maibalik natin yung dating tayo. Ganun yun. Okay, yun yung tinatawag natin na negative feedback loop na tinatawag. Diba, hindi naman perfect isang relationship. Okay, nadadaan yan sa mabuting usapan. Kaya pag medyo nagkaroon kayo ng konting away, medyo tabingi yung relationship nyo, kailangan mo lang medyo ipantay ng konti. Pag-usapan natin. Pag pinag-usapan nyo at naibalik nyo sa dati, you maintain your relationship, you maintain the homeostasis. Medyo na-disturb man ang relationship natin, na-disturb ang homeostasis, maibabalik din natin sa dati. Mari-restore natin yung dating tayo. Mari-restore natin yung homeostasis. Mari-restore natin yung relationship natin. Diba? Ganun lang yun, te. That's the negative feedback mechanism. Bibigyan pa kita ng isa pang example. Your glucose. O, ayan, your glucose, negative feedback din yan. Okay? This is also an example of your negative feedback. Negative feedback is also going on the glucose, your blood sugar. Okay? Because when your glucose is too high, 'di ba? Kapag ang glucose mo is too high, your blood sugar is too high. Okay, what hormone is being released? Your insulin. Counter response, 'di ba? Whereas kapag ang glucose, your blood sugar is low, on the flip side, if your blood glucose is too low, what hormone is produced as a counter response? Your glucagon. Ayan. Counter response lang. Restore into a homeostasis. Yun lang naman yung negative feedback na tinatawag natin. Okay? Ngayon, so hindi ko naintindihan. Ano ba yan? Ubusin natin lahat ng example, te. Okay. O, isa pang example para naman makontento ka. Parang ikaw hindi ka nakokontento sa iisa. Tsa! Okay? O, ayan. For example, blood pressure naman. Ubusin natin example, te. O, blood pressure hanggang sa maintindihan mo. Okay. Your blood pressure, for example, it is set, normal blood pressure mo, for example, is 122. 120 over 80 millimeter per mercury. Millimeter per mercury. And then, due to some factors, okay, it goes up to 140 over 90 millimeter per mercury. Okay, due to some factors. Okay, it could be history of your blood pressure, high blood history, eating particular fats, for example. Okay, different factors that affect the increase of your blood pressure. Anyway, okay, if there's a rise of your blood pressure, ano ang mangyayari? Una, sino yung unang magre-respond dyan? Na-detect niya na may increase sa blood pressure. Na-detect niya, may stimulus test. Sino yan? Si receptor. Okay. Uy, anong sabi ni receptor? May stimulus. Tumaas ang blood pressure. Okay, let's bring this a little more to life. Specifically, your baroreceptor. Baroreceptor. Okay, baroreceptor. Pag sinabi kasi nating baro means pressure. Okay, your baroreceptor that can be found in your neck. Okay, in your carotid artery. Okay, anyway. This particular receptor is very sensitive to change. So, pag tumaas ang iyong blood pressure, your baroreceptor detects that particular stimulus. What it does is to communicate. Anong gagawin ng ating baroreceptor? Baroreceptor now will communicate. Okay, it will generate now an impulse. It will now communicate to your, kanino siya makikipag-communicate? Tapos ang diniscuss, nakalimutan agad. Ano to? Short-term memory, te. Okay. Receptor, your baroreceptor, makikipag-communicate siya kanino? Kay control center na may change ng blood pressure. Okay. Sino naman yung control center po natin ng blood pressure natin? Very good. That is a brainstem. Very good, Marjun. Okay, brainstem. Okay. So, as your baroreceptor detects that change or stimulus, what it does is to communicate to the control center, your brainstem. And, sorry, lilipat lang natin dito, guys. Your effector, okay, your effector organ, okay, your effector organ happens to be dalawa, your heart, of course, and your blood vessels. So, as your blood pressure arises, anong mangyayari dyan? Okay, as your blood pressure arises, what happens? Your counter response, heart rate goes down. Okay, the output of your blood pump out. Okay, your blood pressure goes down. Okay, and your blood pressure will now return into normal state. Okay? Your blood vessels, okay, now begins to dilate. Okay? It becomes wider, so nagiging easier ang blood flow po natin. So, babalik at babalik na yan. Okay, di ba? As your blood pressure increases, okay, as a counter response, your blood vessels, okay, anong mangyayari? Dilates. So, it widens. So, there will be an easier blood flow. So, babalik na po ang blood pressure mo into a normal state na 120/80. Okay? So, when it returns already to a normal, so na-restore mo yung homeostasis po natin, okay, again, the receptor shuts off. The baroreceptor shut off. The control center shut off. The effector organ will also shut off. Because if you overdo, pag hindi nangyari yon at tumaas ang blood pressure mo, magkakaroon ngayon ng problema. May sakit ka na, kailangan mo na ng medication, kailangan mo nang mag-maintain. Pag hindi bumalik yon, hindi na yon negative feedback. Kapag more, and more, tumaas ng tumaas, hindi bumabalik, doon ngayon papasok sa eksena ang tinatawag nating your positive feedback. Very good. Okay? Papasok kayo ng positive feedback dyan. Okay? Don't take it literally. Pag sinabing positive feedback, sa anatomy, pangit na feedback yan. Ayan o, letter P. Positive, pangit na feedback. Ganun. Pangit na feedback. Okay. Your positive feedback, that's a mechanism occur when the initial stimulus, yung initial na stimulus niya, yung na-detect niya na change, further stimulates the response. Further stimulates the response. So, ibig sabihin, instead of getting a counter response, okay, you intensify the variable. Okay, like more, instead of counteracting that stimuli. Okay, the initial stimulus further stimulates the response. So, pangit ba na response yan or maganda? Pangit na response. Okay, take note that your positive response, your positive feedback rather, that is your amplifying cycle na tinatawag. Amplifying cycle. More. Okay? It can be life-threatening. Okay? May stimulus that triggers a particular stimuli. Okay? O, pangit ha ang positive feedback. Hindi ibig sabihin na positive, maganda. The classic example of your positive feedback is, okay, system response causes progressive deviation away from the set point that's outside of your normal range. Not directly used for homeostasis ay mga karakteristik niya. Some positive feedback occurs under normal condition, katulad ng childbirth. Kaya nga nasabi ko kanina guys, na ang positive feedback is pangit because they are generally associated with injury, with disease. Pag hindi mo na-maintain ang homeostasis, yun yung positive feedback. Instead na may counter-response, nag-i-intensify eh. Lalong nag-i-increase more. Okay? More yan. Okay? Instead na may counter-response, okay? Instead of getting counter-response, you intensify the variable. You weren't able to maintain the homeostasis. Hindi mo na-restore, okay, yung ating homeostasis na tinatawag natin. Okay, let's go back to the classic example. Some positive feedback occurs under normal condition, okay, such as your childbirth na tinatawag natin. Okay, ano bang nangyayari, okay, during your childbirth na yan? O, ganito. Asan na ba yun? Journal. O, ito. During your childbirth. Okay. So, kapag malapit nang ipanganak yung ating bata, when a baby is ready to be born, there is a pressure sa cervix. And that pressure to your cervix causes contraction of the uterus. Okay, ang example natin dito, guys. Example is your childbirth. Ayan, example is your childbirth. Ano bang nangyayari? Okay. When a baby is ready to be born, may pressure sa ating cervix na tinatawag po natin. Okay. We have your uterus. Sensya na marunong mag-drawing. Okay, we have your uterus. And we know that your uterus, yan yung bahay bata po natin, it will stretch to a certain point. Okay, it will stretch to a certain point. Okay, when that particular baby is about to be born, mag-i-stretch ang uterus into a certain point. Your brain, pag na-detect na yung tinatawag na chain stimulus na yan, your brain, okay, releases your hormone. Anong nirelease niya? Your oxytocin. Releases your oxytocin. Now, obviously, ang stimulus dyan is yung bata na ipapanganak. Obviously, the stimulus is the baby. So, when the uterus stretch to a certain point, okay, your brain now will release your hormone na oxytocin. So, ito yung ating stimulus. Okay, yan yung ating stimulus. Obviously, yan yung ating stimulus. Yung batang stimulus po natin. Okay? As the brain releases your oxytocin, your smooth muscle now starts to contract. Okay? So, ang smooth muscle po natin, your smooth muscle, okay, starts to contract. Okay, contracts. Okay, starts to contracts. So, yun yung tinatawag nating labor contraction. So, kapag ito kasi guys ay isang negative mechanism, pag na-counter response niya, tapos na-maintain niya. Hindi eh. Sa positive feedback, pataas, letter P, pataas. Pa-intense effect yan. Okay, more. Ano nangyayari dyan? That's your labor contraction. It's getting worse. Intensity goes up. Yung intensity niya kanina na 20 to 30 minutes apart, nagiging 20 to 30 seconds. So, yung response niya is very continuous eh. So, paano mo may i-stop yung ating tinatawag na response into a variable? Okay, what stops the stimulus is kapag lumabas na ang batang yan. Pag lumabas na yung bata. So, ibig sabihin pag ito ay positive response, stimulus continues to respond. Okay? So, the brain continues to amplify greater response, okay, until the stimulus is removed. Okay, yun yung tinatawag natin na positive feedback na tinatawag natin. Okay, so that's it for the discussion of your homeostasis.